Republicans not only are talking about coming for people's freedom, they've already done it. These are raging extremists, MAGA extremists who are coming for your Social Security. They want you to work till you die. You, the voter, you're under threat. They're coming for your money. They're coming for your kids.
I have with me today political strategist and co-author of the recent book, Hit 'em Where It Hurts, How to Save Democracy by Beating Republicans at Their Own Game, Rachel Bitecofer. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm feeling really great. We just picked up another house seat last night.
Well, that's always good to hear, always good. So I wanted to start with a small excerpt from your book, if you don't mind, where you say, here are two truths that many Americans simply will not believe due to the GOP success in branding Democrats and themselves. Today, the Democratic Party is the only political party truly fighting for and preserving American freedom. And though it brands itself with patriotic images and language, today's Republican Party hates freedom. They want fascism. How do you think Democrats fight back against this, given where we are with our current political landscape?
I mean, some of it is about taking back, patriotic imagery and words like freedom and liberty. I mean, we tend to like to think down in the weeds about policy and make policy appeals. But what we need to be doing is having conversations with people's guts, right? And Republicans have been very good. I mean, this is not actually very unique to any party that is collapsing into like a nationalism type of autocracy to really rely on patriotic symbols and symbolism and rhetoric in order to kind of disguise what is at its heart very unpatriotic because it's arguing for a new system, elimination of the Constitution or what have you, right? So it's always been a problem, I think, that Democrats have kind of given national security, like love of country, right? Symbolism to the Republicans and allowed them to brand themselves as that party that stands for kind of freedom and democracy and liberty. And glad that we're fixing that now. But, it certainly is very easy to make the argument because Republicans not only are talking about coming for people's freedom, they've already done it. They've stripped the constitutional right of half of the population, and men may have a hard time understanding this, but you don't just get over that. Like, actually the time that has passed since Dobbs, the memo leaked, our anger is it's simmering hot, and it's just getting worse and worse as we read headlines of women who have faced death, right, at the hands of Republican politicians who have, been willing to let them die. And, every one of us as a woman can imagine ourselves in that position. It's very scary. So it is definitely time for Democrats to take over the mantle of the brand of freedom. We are the party about individual liberty, okay? They are not. We're the people that support gay marriage and pro-pod and, trans rights and civil rights and equal rights for women and racial equality. That is all about individual freedom. The Republican Party's stance is really it's a very, very narrow definition of liberty. It's their liberty. And what they're asking for to be free from is our freedom. Right? So that's not good.
A lot of times it just comes down to they just want the right to discriminate more than freedom. One thing I always talk about on my channel is how the only freedom they want is like for the straight white family. Anybody else, it's like they could care less about freedoms. And one thing that I've noticed on a rather personal level in like the comments and the discourse and the political sphere is how in replacement of a policy platform or real positions, Republicans constantly are just pointing the fingers at Democrats, trying to poison the well, so to speak, and doing it rather effectively, which leaves Democrats constantly on the defensive. How do you think that we flip the script to where we're finally the ones on the offensive, where even now when the data supports us, when we're using it to defend ourselves rather to expose where their weaknesses or inefficiencies are, it's not doing the same benefit?
Yeah, that really gets into like the meat of the book, right? So the book, what's the book? The book is doing two things. A, it's convincing people who are listening to our voices or watching us right now that they are kind of special people in terms of what they are into, politics, okay? Because most people are not into politics. In fact, the American culture really kind of pushes people away from politics and makes disengagement almost feel morally cleaner somehow. So, if we've got a society that is not well informed, it's very, very easy to manipulate public opinion. And as you pointed out, the Republicans, the way that they're winning elections isn't about, hey, I'm Mike Davis and I'm going to get you this, that, and do all these Republican things and it's going to be great. It's, I'm Mike Davis and let me tell you, my Democratic opponent is for defund the police and he's going to turn your boy into a girl and da 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 da, right? And so the book talks about, like, if you have an electorate that doesn't pay attention to news and politics, so they don't know any of the things that are making us unable to sleep at night. If you have that and you do, and you accept that, then the next thing becomes like, okay, well, how best then to maximize the probability of winning any given swing election, right? And you see pretty quickly that the GOP figured out around 10 years ago, really solidified with Michael Steele, who blurbs the back of this book with the his 2010 strategy in the midterms. They figured out it's a lot easier when there's two products, Pepsi and Coke. It's because no one likes politics. People like Pepsi and Coke, right?
Right.
It's when you have two products, you can try selling your product or you try disqualifying the other option. And Republicans figured out, wow, disqualification of the other option. I mean, that's a very, very distinct way to do persuasion electioneering, very different than what we do, right? And they figured out it's a lot easier to push that swing bucket away from the Democrats by branding all Democrats in one hyperbolic broad brush. They're socialist. They're going to defund the police. They're going to turn your male children into girls, right? It's not, they don't like only say that if one of the candidates happens to actually be very radical, right? They say it about all of our candidates from Joe Biden down. And my book is about teaching us how to stop doing the old system, start doing what they do. And the reason why you like that is because of what you just said. The problem with the old strategy is it inherently puts you on defense, right? It is designed for us to be on defense. And therefore, defense is bad, right? What we want to force Republicans into in the fall is, immigration, whatever, right? We want to force them to talk about freedom, right? We want them to talk about stealing women's freedom, coming for people's Social Security and Medicare, the fear threat factor. And if we do that, we're going to find, I think, that swing voters are going to respond because they've already responded to the strategy, A, where we ran it in 2022, but B, also for 10 years to the Republicans where, Florida, Ron DeSantis won with like 60 something percent of the vote. He's a raging extremist. There's nothing moderate about Ron DeSantis, and he never ran as I'm a bipartisan guy. I'm going to work across the aisle. I'm going to put Floridians first. He never said any of that. And yet he cleaned up the middle of the electorate, right? And so to me, you have to ask, well, how and why? And the answer is because they're selling persuasion in a different way than we're selling persuasion. So if we start doing that, that forces them to talk about what we're attacking them about. And, if we don't attack them and put them on defense, then we're always going to close out a campaign talking about what they want to talk about.
Yeah, especially Donald Trump, he kind of discovered the whole just talk like a populist. It doesn't really matter what you do policy wise. If you have the rhetoric that's aggressive enough and brings enough people on board, it creates this kind of tribalism. Like sports is the metaphor I always kind of use, where it's like your team. If you really love your team, even when they're really bad, you're still going to root for them. And in politics, it shouldn't really be the same because it's for your best interest. You should be rooting for that rather than just the team you like or the political party you like more. In the Senate, though, I wanted to ask you where we'll almost be definitely losing a seat in West Virginia from Joe Manchin stepping down. We'll either need Texas or Florida to go blue to keep the majority in the Senate, which is massively important, as I'm sure you know. In your opinion, what needs to be the messaging there to hit that home and win those states?
Yeah, in both states, it's two different incumbents, both incredibly vulnerable to the kind of campaign electioneering strategy I'm advocating, right? Because you got Ted Cruz in Texas, and you've got Rick Scott. He's the architect of steal your Social Security, right? The guy, and he looks like Voldemort. He's just they're both horrible, non-charismatic extremists. So when you ask me my life goal is to make sure in Florida and Texas, they run campaigns that are designed to brand Ted Cruz, Rick Scott, as MAGA extremists who are coming for your Social Security. They want you to work till you die. They're going to pass national abortion bans and leave you nowhere to run. That, to me, that's how we could win those races. Stop doing what we did last cycle in Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio. And I lay this out in the book. I talk about Michigan and Arizona, where the new strategy, where we're not doing persuasion in that old way. And in Florida, we did not do that. And we know for sure that the biography, I'm bipartisan, look, I ride a motorcycle, that stuff's not going to do it. You got to make the campaign about Rick Scott and make voters fear Rick Scott and the Republican Party's brand. At the end of the day, as you were just saying, oh, it's sad that we have to do this with teams. But the fact is, and this is in the front half of the book, what we learned about American voters as soon as we had a capacity to study them in the 1940s, 50s, when surveys and telephones finally got common enough that you could study the population with survey research, the first finding that political science ends up with was, oh, Americans don't know anything about politics. They barely know who the president is. That's it, like literally it, okay? and yet in the book they argue, don't worry though, because in American politics, there's two parties and each party has like a set of platform positions that it is associated with. And so voters don't need to do any research. They don't need to actually know who John Smith is. If they have an R and a D, they can use that as a cognitive shortcut to make their vote choice. And it's always been true that that was a very powerful predictor of who somebody would vote for, even for most independents, because most independents will admit, yeah, I'm independent, but I like the Democrats more, I like the Republicans more. And we know in their voter behavior data that they behave just like people who admit that they're Republicans and Democrats. So you get down to about 15% of the electorate that is truly what we would call pure independent. And we know for sure that what moves them is, they are not paying attention to politics. So if it's gas prices and the price of turkey, like that's the stuff they're going to be aware of. And we have to make sure our campaign strategy is getting through on one basic message, which is to fear the Republican Party.
Yeah, with a lot of people, it's kind of like, oh, emotions, whose voice do I like more, the rhetoric they're using. And I always tell people, like, the most people do is read the headlines. If you just read like one full article on something, you're going to be more informed than most people, especially like a lot of people, because of that and the partisanship we see nowadays, they'll take one thing they like, they're voting on one issue, but because of that and their party supports that, they form the rest of their beliefs around those issues. And most of them aren't issues they really hold. It's just they feel like they have to because, oh, I'm voting on this one issue and that's the party that represents me. And another interesting point that you bring up in your book kind of to that, where you say in Congress, the Republican Party has largely given up on policymaking altogether and has instead shifted to winning elections, messaging their culture war and grievance politics. In both the Senate and the House, Republicans proudly brand themselves as obstructionists, tasked with preventing Democratic majorities from doing the work of the people. And this is something I always see also in my comments and just around just political spheres constantly, where a lot of voters on the right now support this kind of obstructionist behavior, like with the recent border bill, where Republicans brought this issue up forever, said they wanted it with foreign aid, and then rejected it. And the explanation from voters or right-wingers and the spheres are like, oh, they don't want foreign spending. That's not what they want, even though that's what they said they want. And then Senate Republicans passed just a foreign spending bill, but none of the contradictions really seem to matter as long as they're feeling like they own Democrats on something most of the time. How do you address or speak to those people to kind of show them that this isn't even in your own best interest?
I mean, here's the thing, though. It's like, when I say that the Republican Party gets what I'm trying to teach the left in this book, and they have gotten it for a decade, this is exactly what I mean. They know, because nobody pays attention themselves and only like superficially hears things, that they'll pay no price for obstruction because no one will realize it's them. And we can already see that in the first round of polling that came out after Trump killed the border deal. He was more responsible for killing the border deal. Now, if everybody was like us, dude, then people would know. Actually, Donald Trump personally killed that border bill. But no one's like us. No one ever saw that story. They're never going to see that story. So when they ask, a pollster asks them, who's the problem? It's going to be the only person they're aware of, just the president, right? Yeah. And in the very simplistic mind of the voter, when you don't know any of the details of the system and how it operates, the president wants something and does something. And it's just a matter of will if it's not happening, right? When we all know that actually it's very complicated, the separation of power system. You have divided government against an honest opposition, like, Clinton had in the 90s, right? You can still get shit done, but if it's a dishonest opposition that realizes no one will see their obstruction, but they will make Biden pay for inaction, it's a logical strategy. And the only place where they can go wrong is if we finally cut the cycle of abuse, right? And we counter offense on immigration with the message. One message is, at the end of the day, what the ads need to convey, like you get a conclusion from an ad. That conclusion is Trump killed border security, right? We have to tell people that, or they're not going to know. And Republicans have been they've been right all along. They gambled on it for the first time in 2010 and decided to obstruct Obama, like Mick McConnell's actual strategy. They had a whole meeting. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And, a year after killing the economy with the Great Recession and, the Iraq war boondoggle that the GOP pushed us into, they picked up 63 seats in the House running the strategy I'm trying to switch this to. So it really is about meeting the electorate where it is. Unfortunately, our friends and neighbors, our peers, the people we pass in the streets are not into democratic governance. Okay. So it's our job to tell them we're in a crisis moment and who that crisis is coming from very clearly, not big pharma, not the oil industry, the Republican Party.
And I wanted to ask you, while I had you here, if you had any examples of names that you think are currently doing well with the sort of rhetoric you're talking about in your book. I wanted to maybe float the name Gavin Newsom. That's someone I cover. He at least goes at right wingers, on MSNBC and stuff. And I wanted to see if he's kind of in line with what you're talking about, and then maybe other examples, if not, or ones that do.
Yeah, Gavin's not alone, but he is, for me, the optimal messenger for hit 'em where it hurts strategy, because he's already come upon a lot of it naturally. I'm hoping that he is going to read this book. I know I tried to get him one, but hopefully when he does, he's going to be like, oh yeah, now, because he's naturally doing a lot of what we need to be doing. And he's not alone. I think Gretchen Whitmer is great on message. I think there's some rising talent on the bench, like people like Adrian Fontes, John Fetterman, right? Like we are learning. Happy is learning how to putt. Hakeem Jeffries is probably the perfect Speaker of the House for this moment because he's the kid from Brooklyn and he knows how to get it done. So I have high hopes. The Biden campaign is going to run a threat to democracy, threat to freedom message where they're tying for voters. It's not about other people. It's not about, it's about you, voter. You, the voter, you're under threat. They're coming for your money. They're coming for your kids, not other people, because the only people who care about other people are us. Okay. Everybody else is self-interested. So we want that messaging to be very concrete. Dobbs and freedom and abortion makes threat to freedom, makes individual liberty very concrete. So that's why it's so powerful to use as a wedge issue. And I know that the Biden team is going to be doing that. My hope is that we can also do that from the state legislative races to the House, to the Senate, to the governor races, because really that's what we need to fix our down ballot underperformance, which we paid for it in 2020, where we lost seats in the House and we should have been gaining them. And why? Well, we had Biden running, against Trump and chaos, but down ballot, decentralized, every campaign kind of doing their own thing, running the old model of I have a bucket of voters that I need to mobilize, and I have a bucket over here I need to persuade, and I'm going to persuade them on policy and being, bipartisan. Like we can't do that and still win, especially the Senate map, as you pointed out, in 2024. So that's what this book is designed to do, is to make sure we're humming all the way up from state legislature.
And I definitely agree with you, every bit of that. So if there's any last things that you did want to bring up and touch on or go back to and really drive home, or if you just want to shout out where to find the book, the floor is yours. Let the people know.
Yeah, great. You can get Hit 'em Where It Hurts at any book dealer you want, from Amazon to local mom and pop shop. And you can also get it on Audible, where I read it myself. So I'm you'll get to hear my snarky snark voice as I read through.
Wonderful. Always good. And thank you again for taking the time to speak with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yep. Awesome. And until next time, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.